You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel, and as you can see, Daryl's not here today. I don't know why. He might join later. Maybe he's having some technical issues or whatever. Truth is, I haven't heard from him, so really don't know what's going on. But we still have a show, or I still have a show to do for you guys tonight, and we're going to do that. And so tonight, we're basically talking about this whole article that came out. I think it was on screenrant.com. And it was basically John Boyega had done, I forgot the name of the convention actually. I read the article very quickly, and I was really more focused on the fact that obviously John Boyega's talking about his return to Star Wars, but somebody at this convention had asked him, hey, would you ever consider coming back to the Star Wars universe? Or like, I think they said something to the effect of, hey, you should call Dave Filoni or whatever. And he was like, actually, I did, actually, or something like that was his quote. So the idea then is, should this even happen? Right? So, in other words, we basically have John Boyega's possible return to the Star Wars universe. But on the other hand, like with the sequel trilogy characters, it's really difficult, I think, in a lot of ways, because there are certain characters that are definitely liked, like Kylo Ren, for instance. There are people who do like Rey, but I mean, for the most part, I think that it's safe to say that even the people that didn't really like or appreciate the movies, there's nobody that's really clamoring to see these characters ever again. I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that people sometimes, um, in at least in regard to most of the sequel trilogy, there are people that like the movies, but nobody is actually trying to, um, you know, say, "Hey, I want to see these characters in other projects." Now, of course, we know that Adam Driver famously tried to make a film called The Hunt for Ben Solo. He had basically pitched this idea about the return of Ben Solo at the time to Kathleen Kennedy. By the way, Daryl said he's coming in, so as soon as I see his face pop up, we'll bring him in on the discussion. But essentially, he pitches this to Kathleen Kennedy, and then they basically turn it down for whatever reason. Now, of course, with the new president, I'm forgetting her name, um, and then also Dave Filoni now being in charge, things could actually change, right? Maybe somebody takes another look at The Hunt for Ben Solo as a story, but we'll basically have to see. I mean, we'll have to see where this lands. I'm just going to go ahead and start putting up some of these comments while we're waiting for Daryl to get on. Ted, of course, starts us off. He basically says, Finn got the shaft in the sequels. I'd love to see him and Rey get a good story. And then, of course, Dom comes in, and of course, Ted basically had said a bunch of other stuff, but this comment that Dom said relates to that. Dom said, Finn was better than Rey, but I wasn't a huge fan of him. I just want to fully disassociate the Rey trilogy from Star Wars, as it doesn't deserve to be in the same league as the previous films. And look, I don't necessarily disagree with that. And honestly, where Dom's point comes in, I think is really where a lot of the fans sit right now. I think a lot of people, like I said, they pretty much, and by the way, if I start to stumble a little bit, just understand it's like I did not expect to have to carry this show solo. So that's why I'm still getting my bearings a little bit, because like I said, I was not given any indication that Daryl wasn't going to be on, and he says he's coming, so hopefully that actually turns out to be the case. But I think where Dom's coming from is pretty much spot on, right? There's a lot of people who felt that way about the sequel trilogy. That, look, we really don't think that these films deserve to have that same prominence as the prequel trilogy, even, or especially the original trilogy. And it's like people were just so disappointed by the sequel trilogy. It's like, what's the point? Why even bother with this? And so I think that when you're looking at a possible return of a sequel trilogy character, this is where Ted's comment comes into play. Ted's talking about, hey, listen, I mean, these guys, especially Finn, and we're going to talk about that more in depth, by the way, where he got the shaft. They didn't actually fully flesh out his character. There were so many things that they could have done with the Finn character that they just didn't do. And as a result, uh, I think that some fans actually liked the character of Finn, but just felt like, you know what, more should have and could have been done with him. And we would like to see that. And I think that that's what Filoni and maybe Boyega are banking on, is the fact that maybe they do see a little bit more of a backstory, or a little bit more of a responsible handling of the Finn character. So let me just type to Daryl once again. Um, trying to figure out where he is. Um, but again, I think that whether you land in the with the camp that says, "Hey, I don't want to see any of these sequel trilogy characters, anything else," or, "Hey, I do want to see some of these, but just in a better story," I think it's either one. I think Lucasfilm has an uphill battle as far as what's going on. All right, let me get to some more of these from Ted, because he actually expounds on his point a little bit, and I think it's a point, honestly, that's a good one. He says, "I like the characters, the sequel plots and details not so much. I feel like the majority of the fans wanted to see Finn go full force." That's interesting, because I think that people were torn on that too. So I'll tell you what I think that really, in my opinion, should have happened with Finn. Okay. First of all, Finn should have been more fleshed out, is the fact that he was a former stormtrooper who defected and is now running away. And he's basically toying with the idea of maybe joining this rebellion. But at the same time, it's almost like it parallels Han Solo in a way, where he wanted to just have nothing to do with anything. He didn't really care about this whole resistance versus first order versus a new republic, any of that. He wanted nothing to do with any of this. He just wanted to go off, basically like in retirement or something, and just deal with that. And I think that where they probably needed to go with Finn was to lean a little bit more into the fact that he was a former stormtrooper that was defecting, and the fact that there's a lot of backstory there. We've never really seen anything out of the stormtroopers in either the prequel, well, the prequel trilogy. They were clone troopers, right? And we did get a little bit of a backstory on them, and they did interact with the main characters a lot. So there was a humanization, if you will, on that side of things. Flip side, though, stormtroopers, they were almost automatons. They really didn't have any real personality. Sure, you had that little conversation between the two stormtroopers in that Death Star scene, where they were talking about like some new ship or something. And you do get a little bit of humanization there, but you don't really get a fully fleshed out backstory from these guys. And I think that that's really where they needed to lean into the Finn character a little bit, was, listen, you're giving us something that we've never seen before. And this is where Dom's point comes in. It's like, okay, you're giving us Rey, who's basically this overpowered, Mary Sue type character, just basically a big mess, and you're making her the focus. And again, this has nothing to do with oh, she's a female character or any of that. This is the problem. They're actually facing this in Star Trek right now with that Starfleet Academy show or whatever that was canceled because it was just so woke it was ridiculous. And of course, there's a meme going around that I find hilarious where it basically says, "Hey, you know, uh, this isn't your Star Trek." And then it's like, well, why hasn't anybody watched it? Well, as you said, it wasn't our Star Trek. And with that, we bring Daryl on. All right. So I was basically just talking about the fact that with the Finn character, and we got in some chats from Dom and from Ted, but basically the fact that they wasted him, they should have leaned a little bit more into the character and gone with the whole idea that, hey, look, he was a former stormtrooper, and you could have. I was talking about how we haven't really seen the humanization of the stormtroopers. Clone troopers, yes, but
Hmm.
not the stormtroopers. And why didn't we get a little bit more of that? So that's pretty much where I left off on that.
Yeah. Um, Finn's character was one that unfortunately was just, you know, pushed to the side. I mean, we had kind of replacements for all the main characters. Um, you had Ray, who could have been Leia. You had Poe, who could have been Han. And then we don't know if Finn was supposed to be the replacement for Luke, if or what. But um, it was just so disheartening to see that because especially from if you recall about the trailers, like you remember we watched the what was it, Force Awakens trailer,
Yeah.
and we watched there even John Boyega's reaction, right? Like when he's he flips over the couch and he's like, "Whoa!" Like he's like super excited, and he's like acting like he's got the lightsaber. He's like, "Yeah, come on, Kylo Ren!" Like he's so
Yeah.
it
That
I
didn't
think
last
it
long.
just right, I mean, and I think for him it just caught him off guard. Excuse me, off guard as well, um, because they did, and that just goes back to not to be the dead tauntaun here, but it's kind of what we've always talked about since the sequels have come out. They just didn't have a plan, and unfortunately, that included uh, the loss of the Finn character because there was talks of him supposed to being force sensitive. That's what he was trying to tell Ray in the Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, the Rise of Skywalker. He wanted to tell her that he think he's force sensitive, and they never even got around to it. So yeah, it's just it sucks because he was like the only one out of the new group of people that didn't have uh, a plan. They didn't have a plan for it.
Yeah, and I mean, and I talked about too earlier that I mean it's a mixed bag, right? People don't necessarily want to see the sequel trilogy characters, anything else. I mean, apparently Adam Driver had pitched that whole, Hunt for Ben Solo movie, and Kathleen Kennedy was like, yeah, no. So now under Filoni, that could change. And I said it earlier too. I keep forgetting the name of the actual a woman who really took over the real presidential duties of Lucasfilm. Something like Owen or I don't know, whatever it is. The thing is, if they agree that maybe they can go, because again, this is all predicated upon a Screen Rant article where Boyega was at some convention and he was alluding to the fact that he's talking about, or at least is talking to Filoni, and that he's willing to return. Because the other thing that you got to remember too was that you talked about Filoni or Boyega's enthusiasm when the Force
Hmm.
Awakens trailer comes out and he's all like, you
Yeah.
know, fanboying out. And then obviously, due to his experiences, he isn't exactly enthralled with it. And I remember he famously said, "Yeah, you're not going to Disney Plus me," meaning,
Hmm.
you're not going to create. Oh, Linwen, thank you, Universal. Universal's here, by the way. He uh he gave us that information. Yes, Lenwin is the name of the president. Thank you. Um, he basically, and a lot of people, took that. I wouldn't even say really wrong. I mean, I understand his frustration, but it's like, look, dude, you're not, he had that Pacific Rim sequel. he's not exactly setting the world on fire here. It's like this happens with a lot of people when a big franchise makes them, right? Like here's basically what happens in a nutshell.
You got too big for the britches up too soon.
Well,
As
basically
my
what it
grandfather
is
would say.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, because what happens is they get this taste of fame because they're a lead role in a huge franchise.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you exactly what this is like. This is like you get say like, I don't know, guitar player of a really famous band or something, or a
Hmm.
keyboard player, drummer, bass player, whatever. You get somebody who's not the singer, who's, part of some just like ginormous band. Well, then they decide, hey, part of this really huge band. I'm a big part of it. People know who I am. I have a fan base. Okay, well then they try to go solo. Guess what happens? They can barely sell
Mm.
out a club because the fandom doesn't necessarily follow you just because they like you in this particular project, whether it be a band or a film. And so I think what happened
Right.
with a lot of these sequel trilogy guys and gals is they probably thought, okay, Star Wars is going to put me in like huge prominence. And then I'm going to go off and I'm going to set the world on fire in all these films. And what they have yet to learn is you're not the famous one. It's your character that's famous. Nobody cares about,
Mm.
Daisy Ridley. They care about Rey. Nobody cares about John Boyega. They care about Finn. And actually, it's arguable since they're the sequel trilogy people if they care about him at all. But you know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's like Mark Hamill didn't go out and start doing a bunch of blockbusters. Now, he did, don't get me wrong, he was successful. Harrison Ford arguably was the most successful one.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying? It's
I
like the
mean James
fandom.
Earl Jones.
Yeah, right. Or, people like that had already had some sort of a career, I mean, Alec
Right.
Guinness or something. But by and large, it's like, look, when you're part of a giant franchise like this, it's the character that they care about, not the actor. And I think that he just got a little bit too arrogant for his own good in that sense. So and I think that that's what people were alluding to when, look, he had some legitimate gripes against the company, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's like, look, man, you need to stop acting like, you just got your pick of projects or something and that you don't need Star Wars just as bad as you might feel they need you.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the fan base reacted. Well, I think he's learning that. I think he's kind of like, you know what? Projects aren't exactly coming in fast and furious. There you go. There's a little thing for David there. So maybe I should just tone it down a little bit and yeah, you know what? Let's gauge some interest.
Yeah, I mean, his 'cause John Boyega, he was like you said, he was in a what you said Pacific Rim sequel. There was that one thing that he was part of Detroit, after our hometown. I forgot, now I never saw it, but I mean I really didn't hear that much about it either. So, so that's what I'm saying. Like you had opportunities and you had in bigger projects, it just didn't go anywhere. And so
Right.
and you were the guy, right? You were also the lead. And so you couldn't put the team on your back and make it a win. And so that's another thing that he has to have to realize and come to the realization of too is that you know you've kind of had a chance, a small moment to capitalize, and then you didn't. And when you didn't, you kind of fell from grace on that. And then once you start, complaining, which, like I said, I don't disagree with the things that he said, but it's just like now you lack the credibility to really, you know, to win over fans with that. So, but now, like I said, I'm glad to hear that he's at least had talks with Filoni. At least there's a space where enough time has passed where he's maybe healed in some ways, and there's it's a new day over at Disney, and they're looking like, hey, we know what really happened. We weren't in control. We had nothing to do with that. We couldn't do anything about that. Well, now we can. We're different. We have, you know, it's a new day. So maybe you consider if we have the right story coming
Yeah.
back and joining
Well,
us.
into that effect, Dom says need to move away from that trilogy, including not reusing the actors for future films. And again, I mean, I don't necessarily, it's a mixed thing for me. Like on one hand, I'm sort of there myself because again, this is part of the Skywalker saga, and I really think they need to start, especially theatrically, distancing themselves and come up with something new and not necessarily be an extension. That and again, I'm the expanded universe guy. I love to go and watch and read and everything, all these little extensions of stories from what we would call the Skywalker saga because there was just so much that was created and yet unexplored. I think there's a plethora of stories that they could tell that would be captivating and would have some familiarity, but it would also enrich some of the stories that are already out there. Much like if they ended up making, say, a movie or animated movie or whatever on Catalyst, which was basically a prequel to Rogue One.
Yeah.
Catalyst was amazing. I mean, it was an
Hmm.
amazing book. It was an incredible story, and it would serve to enrich Rogue One and A New Hope and all that other stuff. So, I mean, it's basically a win-win. So, I get that. So, I understand people wanting to do it. And I mean, I started off this show by saying that they did Finn a little dirty. You know, they
Yeah.
they he was something that we've never seen before. A stormtrooper who we actually get a little bit of his backstory. He defects. There's a lot in there that they could have explored and that they could have played on, and especially as it carried into The Last Jedi. And I get it. I mean, it's not, Finn, a Star Wars story, but at the same time, he ended up being relegated to a background character, and he's probably arguably one of the most interesting characters of the sequel trilogy.
True. I mean, like I said, if you were taking it from the character perspective, um, if if you have Ray, who's supposed to be your surrogate Luke Skywalker, and you have her trained by Luke, and then we all know within canon, Luke eventually trains Leia. Like that's still something different we've never seen. I mean, if they wanted to bring him in, let's just say if they wanted to continue that, I think that's the only way you could do it is to like now either make him or show that, hey, um, Ray, I need you to train me, or that he's found a way to get training elsewhere. Like maybe he ran into, you know, I don't know, Ahsoka somewhere, and you know, got trained, or Ezra, or I don't know, maybe somebody else who's, uh, or it would be hilarious that because John Boyega's character Finn had a lot of fear, he was always running away. Make him a dark side guy.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being somewhat interesting too. There's a lot of different things. Let me get to some of these chats, and then we'll go on because there's so much that we can unpack with Finn and this announcement that. Again, it's not like there's an official announcement. Yeah, he's coming back, but
Right, exactly.
that's
Just them
why.
talking.
Yeah, that's why the thumbnail I kind of sort of did a little play on the whole Palpatine thing. But um, Dom says, didn't Finn fight with the lightsaber first, and Ray showed up and ruined the movie? Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that was the thing that was kind of cool about Finn, right? Is the fact that yes, first he got the guy, traitor, that guy, right?
yeah,
So first he ends up fighting, with that. I think that's where he first picked up the lightsaber, and then of course,
yeah.
famously, he duels a very weakened Kylo, at the end of the movie. And then of course Ray, comes in, which of course, I have to mention this every time I bring this up, but I
I know.
remember it's funny because I just remember the whole time when that lightsaber like flew up, we so thought it was going to be Luke that was going to catch it. I mean,
Absolutely.
that would have been so mind-blowingly amazing.
Especially since it was originally his lightsaber.
Yeah, I
Ugh,
mean, what a missed
poetic
opportunity
justice.
that was. Yeah.
Poetic justice.
I mean,
Man.
that's just uh, every time I think of that,
Ugh.
I can't help but think of that. And I get it, people are like, "Oh, that's super obvious or whatever." But you know what? Obvious is not always bad. All right, let me get to some of these from Universal cuz there's a lot here. Now, he's when Ted was basically asking, if he was earlier, if he was like a force sensitive guy or whatever. And he says, Ted, not full force, but a lot more than what he did, which was nothing. Uh, he says, the Ray trilogy is mostly unwatchable, and from a business point, broke even in the end because the third one lost a lot of money. Uh, it'd be interesting to, see Grandmaster's whole take on that. He says Finn's lightsaber scene was a tease with no payoff, exactly, and understandably
Yeah.
angered the fans when there was no payoff from what was one of the better scenes in the trilogy.
Yeah.
Then goes on to say, I'm not going to share what the conversations were about that John spoiled. Okay. You can if you want. I mean, we're not, we're pretty much a like a all spoiler zone.
All right.
I get it, but it's like, look, man, I went through this with the Cobra Kai group. This is almost like a little mini rant. But I remember it was so funny, right? Like a new season of Cobra Kai would come on. And people, obviously, because they released all the episodes in one chunk, would
Binge watched it.
instantly talk about all of it, like, later that day. And invariably, you would get a small but loud group of people that would be like, why are you doing this? At least give people the weekend or, the spoiler warnings and stuff. And we were all just like, look, you're coming onto a Facebook group, man. I mean, and yes, I know things will pop up in the feed and then you read it and it spoils it and it disappoints you. So mute the group. Take some of the responsibility yourself. And I remember I even used to say, what are we supposed to discuss? Like some, really cool scene from season one. I mean, a new season of a show drops in a group that you're watching. What else are we going to talk about? Of course you're going to talk about that. And that's the way I look at Star Wars a lot of times too. It's like, look, you're coming here and you see what's being discussed. If something there is in danger of spoiling it for you, usually small YouTubers like ours probably shouldn't be saying this, but don't watch right away. Wait till some time has passed. So we don't care about spoilers. But at the same time, yeah, the, the whole lightsaber scene was a tease that was never paid off. When even in the Rise of Skywalker, when he started to alluding to the fact that hey, maybe he's force sensitive, that seemed to be what was implied there, had no payoff. Like he said that, and we never heard from him again. Same thing with that stupid Maz Kanata thing. Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
a
Story
different
for another time.
another time or whatever. Well, I guess not in the sequel trilogy. I mean, unless
Right.
there's been a novel or a comic or something that explored it. But really, see, that's the kind of thing that I really hated about the sequel trilogy is the fact that there was just a lot of, and again, I think it comes from, and I know you and I have talked about this on a lot of shows. This comes from the fact that there was no real plan. They were just making it up as they went.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a Han Solo plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're gonna stay with the sequel characters, I mean, I think you do need to address Finn if you're gonna continue with the sequels. Of course, most of it, I'm kind of with Dom. Like, I think we probably need to move past sequel characters and kind of go another direction. But my thing is, if you're going to do deal with it, you have to address Finn, and you have to give him his just due. You have to give him some substance that people can actually get behind. Because I mean, otherwise, you got. I mean, he's just like because he could have been anything. Even if he wasn't a Jedi, okay, make him like a great because he was in the First Order. Make him a great. Um, Learn how to be a great like admiral or something like that, like a great leader. Where he can, hey, this is how you beat. Make him a clever guy. Like, hey, this is how you beat the First Order. This is how you can kind of work around this. Like, give him, like, let him be on the political side with Leia or something like that. Like, just like, do something with him. You can't just give us this character and then, you know, because his love for Ray didn't work out. It's just like, well, we don't know what else to do with him. So and then his love with Rose didn't work out either. So it was like, if he's not falling in love with somebody, it's just kind of like we don't know what to do with him.
I hear BB-8 is available.
No,
Uh,
we got a little Lobot thing going. I mean, not Lobot,
yeah,
L3 thing going
L3,
on.
yeah,
Landon.
exactly. But I mean, well, here's the problem as I see it too, and this is of course going into the next phase of this. Should they actually do it? Like, I think that yes, I again, I'm with both camps. Like, if they never made another film or project, I mean, if it's a comic or a book, it really doesn't matter. I don't, nobody cares. I mean, I'm not saying nobody cares as far as that, but I mean, it wouldn't be considered a waste, right? Because there's a
Mhm.
number of authors and illustrators and everything that are making these comics, that are making these novels, that dedicating a novel to Finn or something like that, or a comic series, which they have done, by the way. They've done a comic series. Dedicating something like that to that character wouldn't necessarily slow anything down, right? You're not depriving a different story because of that. But when you start talking about TV series, animated show, or an animated movie, theatrical live action film, yeah, I could see where somebody might be concerned about, hey, if we're starting to waste time on all these sequel guys, because, and this is what I brought up when we made the announcement and talked about the whole Hunt for Ben Solo. Now, that's something that I would actually like to see because I loved the Kylo Ren. I really loved the Ben Solo character, and I didn't think we got enough of him in The Rise of Skywalker. It was kind of like, oh, this is actually cool. I wouldn't mind seeing a whole movie with this
Mhm.
guy. And lo and behold, Adam Driver was actually interested. That's another thing you're
Yeah.
starting to see now is like, you know, I mean, before it was kind of like when Oscar Isaac famously said, "Yeah, if I need another house, I'll do a Star Wars movie," and it was basically like everybody's attitude. Nobody really, Adam Driver had famously said, "Yeah, I'm not really interested in doing anything." Well, turns out that not only it wasn't even like he was approached. I mean, he helped come up with this story. He was the one that was pitching this. So obviously, these guys are re-embracing their characters, and I think in a good story, so would the general population. Now, here's the question that you and I could talk about a little, because this is where this all comes to, I guess comes to a point. What are they going to do with these people? Like, the hunt with for Ben Solo, that seemed like it was okay because I think that was, and that was supposed to take place afterward too, I think. But it's like you don't have the first order anymore. They became the final order, and then now they're no order, right? So
Mhm. Right.
Palpatine's destroyed, the Empire's destroyed. You obviously have the Starfighter thing that takes place afterward. So you actually have to come up with some new villain. I mean, maybe this is where, I mean, I guess you could be, it would be a little dangerous to do this, but they could bring the Yuuzhan Vong in, or they can create just some other threat. But it's like, is it just going to be another Empire type of thing? I mean, and that's fine too, because like I often say, when everybody talks about, oh, it's always some sort of a super weapon with these guys. Oh, look, that's Star 3 or whatever. It's like, well, when they're coming up with plots for earthly films, if they're like political type stuff, it's always something like that. I mean, granted, I guess I could make it a little different, but you know what I'm saying? It's like they got to give somebody for these guys, they got to give them a reason to exist. And I think that's what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, I like the fact like that's what made Mandalorian and Grogu so well, not Grogu, but Mandalorian so good was okay, you have the remnants of the Empire, but you
Mhm.
got Moff Gideon who's trying to like figure out how to synthesize the the force out of blood. And he's like, okay, maybe I'll find a way to create some super soldiers that will obey me that have the force because that's one thing like we haven't tried yet as an empire. And that seemingly those are the only people who can really defeat us are the Jedi. Which made sense because like, when what was it, season two? When Luke showed up and it was like a Jedi and he looked at the screen and he like you saw his face, like he kind of freaked out, like, uh-oh. Like, because he knows, right?
Well, and I
He
think,
knows what
the
they
other
can do.
thing too, yeah, it's not even just the Jedi, the fact that I think the implication
Knew
was that
which
he
one.
recognized Luke
Yeah, he
because
knew which Jedi too. Is that
yeah,
yeah.
the thing is like, okay, this is a guy that went into a room with the Emperor and Vader, and he's the only one that came out. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
if you could defeat both the Emperor, because he doesn't know what happened. I mean, to most of those
Right.
guys, they're just kind of like, this guy like took out both of them. So how scary and terrifying is this guy gonna be? And then of course, he sees how he's just, and I love the fact,
Mowing through everybody.
well, I love the fact that those death droids or whatever, they showed you through the other characters just how nearly invincible those things were.
Man, yeah.
Because that was perfectly juxtaposed when Luke just mowed through them all with like zero effort, basically.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
was a good way of showing that, Luke's power is so far beyond what any of these guys could even hope.
Yeah. Den, I mean it took like yeah, Den like maybe 10, 20 minutes to deal with one. Like he was fighting with that
Hmm.
That spear he had, and he was
Yeah, and
kind
even
of he
Kara
was
and all
really on
those
the
guys. I
ropes.
mean, it just took them forever, like you said, to just deal with one at a time. And it was just like,
Then Luke just came through and was just like, nope, nope, you come here.
I mean,
I
it
mean,
was
it's just
basically
like,
like when the prequel guys were just cutting down all the battle droids. I mean, it was just,
yep,
it was
exactly.
effortless.
Hmm.
just, it just showed you that. All right, so now we get this spoiler from Universal. Um, he says, okay, in a previous interview, John said, he said Boyega revealed there was a cut version scene that would confirm Finn as a Jedi in Rise of Skywalker. There was a couple, but it was good to tease it. I wanted to say it when they're going down into the quicksand. Okay. It says the actor, known for his role as Finn in the sequel trilogy, recently suggested that any comeback would hinge on a few key factors, most notably the return of Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron. Well, yeah, I because they were kind of like the buddy comedy duo almost, right? They're
Yeah,
kind of like Murtaugh and Riggs, or
yeah.
I
Mike and
mean,
Marcus from Bad Boys or
yeah,
something.
exactly. It's like, I mean, they kind of had that sort of thing going, right? That buddy cop type thing. And again, that would be super cool to see. What if you did Bad Boys or Lethal Weapon in the Star Wars universe? I
Mm,
mean, and you could do that with Poe and Finn easily. And then you can use that to maybe tell a little bit of Finn's backstory, I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily have to be like Family Guy style. Yeah, like you remember that time that I,
Yeah.
and then we see a little bit of you know prequel stuff. Although I wouldn't mind. It makes you wonder when I don't remember when Lord Santeca when they were on that planet, the opening basically of the Force Awakens,
Hmm.
right? I don't remember the name of that planet. I'm sure Universal type it in a second, but I think that I was. Oh, I want to put this. I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if that was the first time that Finn had questions about what he was doing or whether he should do.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like
I
you
get
could
your
make
point.
the argument that yeah, maybe that was like the last straw or something. He was just like, yeah, man, I gotta go. But it would almost be interesting to see something to where you have the stormtrooper who's just increasingly not really about everything else, and you see a little interaction. And I can point to the Bloodline novel, not the Bloodline novel, Lost Stars, because you had obviously it was juxtaposed. You had that girl and the guy, and she went off to they were actually both went off to the Empire, but then I think it was Wedge or somebody that got to him, and then he ended up joining the rebellion, and then it was almost like Nicholas Sparks' novel in space at that point. But it was really good though, really well done. And I think one of the things in that was they had a good chunk of scenes in that book where it was just the people in the Empire just talking amongst themselves, right? And
Hmm.
I can envision something like that if you did more of a prequelized Finn. Now, there's a couple other things that Universal is basically saying that relates to this. He says Boyega indicated that any new story with this character must recapture that dynamic on the big screen, and that also he wants the project to include Chewbacca and actor Jonas Swatamo and a strong cinematic script that gives his character meaningful storylines. Well, I would imagine, yeah, that's that's what you're gonna go for, right? But where do you envision? Like, I mean, obviously, we agree they should bring back in some shape. But what are some of the things? I mean, we talked about maybe the lethal weapon in space and some of the Force stuff, maybe even a prequel. I mean, if you had to envision like the thing that's going to put your butt in the theaters really fast as it relates to Finn, which one's it going to be?
Um, excuse me. I think somewhat of a like Finn's I hate to say like Star Wars a Finn story, but like I would love to see okay him because he was brought on as a child, so he grew up in the First Order. Now I think it's hilarious that like he was part of the sanitation crew. How did you end up on the planet? Because it's like, when did they start taking custodians to go murder a bunch of people? So it sounds like they just grabbed a bunch of people, like, hey man, you ain't doing nothing right now. Come on, you know. I mean, you all had basic training, so get down here. And uh I think that might have been like the first time he realized, like, well, crap, what are we doing? you know. Then he sees it, he's like, yeah, I'm not cool with this. So it's almost like a Lion King 1.5 where you kind of see some of the events that happen from Finn's perspective and to understand like why he was like, yeah, okay, you know what, I got to get out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. But then also I love to see like him when he kind of comes to the realization that he has the force or that he is force sensitive because we never really got a chance to see that. So I would like if they're gonna bring him back. You know, uh, I think that's a good thing to see is that when did you start to notice that you were force sensitive and um his relationship. No, and he said you want to have a relationship with Poe and Chewie. So I'm thinking maybe in between Rise of Skywalker and Last Jedi. Like I think that's probably like an area, a space where you can kind of,
That's true because I think there was a year that transpired between that.
yeah. And I think in that year, you can kind of show the growth and development and uh, of of his character. Maybe when he first starts getting the inkling that hey, there might be something more to me than I thought.
Yeah. No, without question, because here's a couple of things that you can do with that, honestly. So just going with that theme, you can basically set it between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. And what would happen is if you actually covered enough, it could almost explain why he wasn't in The Rise of Skywalker much. And in the context of all the movies, right? Like if you watch Force Awakens and Last Jedi, then whatever this is, or maybe a couple, and then you watch The Rise of Skywalker, it's almost like, oh, well, we already saw a bunch of Finn, so it makes sense now that they're returning to these other characters, see,
Hmm.
what they're doing. So, and the fact that he's like, hey, I got some, I got to talk to you about, or whatever he said to Ray, you can also you can show what he was talking about, like you said, what has he discovered about himself? It's almost like you can basically make some of this stuff make sense.
Yeah,
So it's like retconning, but without really retconning. You're basically shoring it up,
feeling,
giving it
yeah,
more context, more story, a little bit more plot, and more character development. So that way, the Rise of Skywalker, if you view it through that lens, if you see this other movie or movies or whatever it ends up being, then yeah, you can. It's almost like, oh, well, now this doesn't bother me. All right, so then, yeah, Universal has a lot on this one. He says, Boyega explained pairing Finn and Poe is central to his interest. He emphasized a proper return requires a movie with right energy and storytelling rather than a smaller or less ambitious project. I guess he's really going for theatrical here. Uh,
hmm,
so Tamo's involvement also seems non-negotiable, signaling that Boyega sees Finn's journey is intertwined with the classic ensemble. And then, John remains engaged with the franchise as a fan. He follows news online. You watch his reaction videos. Be nice if he watched our show and keeps up with announcements even when he's not directly involved. Hey, maybe because we're doing a Finn centric show, maybe maybe like Boyega will actually see this, right?
great. He might want to come on. It'd be awesome.
Oh, that would be really cool. But his
And I,
grandmaster, he points out,
well, it,
look, all those guys like, they want money though. Like you got to pay
of
them.
course,
It's not like they're just coming on. And I'm like, well, hey, I mean, I'd pony up the cash or at least part of it if I thought that, be kind of cool.
well, here's the thing though. It's also I can see why he wanted to bring Eunice in because Chewie didn't have much of a role. Like we used to seeing Chewie around.
Right.
Chewie had a diminished role as well too. So I can
Yeah.
understand like he's
Good
almost
point.
kind of like fighting for those who are like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although, see, Chewie's diminished role didn't bother me as much. Only
No, especially
because,
when Han died.
right, and, I thought actually he was probably more prominently featured in the sequel trilogy than he even was in the original trilogy in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
But even if he hadn't, I mean, I would have been okay because, again, the idea was they were handing the baton to the new characters. Now, the way that I was hoping this would go, I was really hoping that, in my own head canon back before, like when this was first announced in 2012 or whatever, but before they actually had the movie out, right? There's like 3 years between. And I was really hoping that what they would do is they would make episode 7, where they would introduce the new characters, but it would mainly be a Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie, three, that whole thing adventure. Like they would be the ones. It was solidly their adventure. You're introducing the new characters. Then in episode 8, again, none of this stuff had titles, so that's why I'm not referring to them by their titles. Episode 8, you would see more of a transitional thing. You would start to see the new characters rise up a little bit in prominence in the storyline, and the main characters would begin, not totally, but begin to take more of a back seat. And then episode 9, basically, okay, now it's more of a 70-30 thing, right? The main characters, like I should say the original trilogy characters, are taking more of a back seat, and it's clearly handing it off to the next generation. And that's what I was hoping would happen, and it didn't. So, I mean, I was already somewhat going, okay, you can't, I mean, unless they were going to do the stories of the expanded universe, you can't really keep those guys like that forever. Now, of course, in other discussions, I basically just had a discussion with somebody on Facebook today in a group that I'm on that talked about these AI things. Like, I would be totally fine if either Lucasfilm themselves or maybe they just let license stuff out, because the technology is only getting better. So let a lot of these, hey, this is in between Empire and Return of the Jedi, or, that kind of thing. Let those stories be told with basically AI. I know a lot of people are freaking out, but some of that stuff's really cool. Like these little, 10-minute things that you see. And they're getting more impressive as time goes on. All right. Ted. Ted says, reverse engineering a backfilled story. Yes, that's basically what it is. Then Universal saying Boyega confirmed the scene intended to reveal that Finn was Force sensitive. The marketing for Star Wars: The Force Awakens featured Finn holding a lightsaber. Well, that was the thing. They definitely were alluding to the fact that Finn was a little bit more than what he appeared. And I don't know. I mean, how did you feel about that whole thing?
Well, I mean, I just Ray looked. Ray was dressed more like a Jedi. Like she kind of had more of the Jedi look. However, you know, they did kind of hype Finn up as he was, going to be a Jedi. Especially, like I said, the reaction video that we saw is just like, yeah, all right. He's like, come on, Kylo. And you're like, okay, this is gonna be cool. This is gonna be different. And because it was just kind of like, oh, a stormtrooper's about to fight the Empire, but he's a Jedi now. It's like interesting.
They're Jedis now. They're Jedis now.
All right, they can fly now.
Well, and here's this is what's interesting to me about this. This is one of the few times actually in this whole franchise that I was sort of good either way, right? Like on one hand, I felt it was a little cheesy. It's like, oh geez, does everybody have to be like, I get from the Obi-Wan perspective, Broom Kid, all that stuff, that everybody's got a little bit of the Force in them. It's just a Jedi. And then, of course, they brought the midi-chlorians in. And it's like, okay, if your midi-chlorian count is like X or above, you have enough to where you can harness the Force in a way that the average person can't. And that puts you on the path to be either a Jedi or a Sith, or, some gray Jedi, or some really powerful Force user or whatever. But that really everybody in the universe has a little bit of, they could tap into a little bit because the Force binds us and goes through us and, all that stuff. So at first I was kind of like, okay, well, it does sort of fit that. But that being said, there was a part of me that was just like, man, does everybody have to be like a Force user? Can't we just live with the fact that this guy is a stormtrooper who has a conscience, who defects? Like, look, there's enough there. You really don't need the Jedi angle on this. You don't need the Force using angle on this. But that said, if they did make him like, hey, he's definitely really force sensitive. The basically the ability is there, and he becomes part of Rey's Jedi Academy or something. I mean, I'm good with that too. So really, it's one of the few times where I really go back and forth on, you know.
Yeah, yeah. It is one of those, like I agree with you. It could be either or situation, but I think it's just the marketing, the way it was presented,
Well,
the
yes,
titling. It's
yes,
just I think
you're
that's just
right.
the
I mean,
part that
they
was kind of like
they showed him with the
misleading.
lightsaber in the
Like,
commercial.
yeah,
All right, well,
yeah.
let me get to a few more of these chats here. Uh, Universal says, unfortunately, the words "I'm a Jedi" did not make the final cut of the Revenge of Sky or the Rise of Skywalker. The theatrical cutscene has Finn yelling "Rey, I never told you" or being sucked under the sand. Yes. Um, and he goes on to say, despite being rescued later on, Finn makes no attempt during the remainder of the movie to tell Rey that he's a Jedi, which is part of what bothered me. Why even put that out there? Then, of course, Dom says what I think a lot of people are thinking: who even cares about this stuff anymore? Some billionaire needs to buy Star Wars and cancel all future films and movies and just leave it be forever. Well, and look, I mean, I guess I would admit that if they're going to keep dragging this thing, you know, and just making disappointing projects, I would agree that maybe let's just leave it to the novels and the comics like it was in the 90s, right? But
My question for Don would be, what is it that you have against Star Wars as a whole? Because it seems like even if they did create something good, you would still hate it. So, what is it about the franchise itself that you don't like?
well, and while he's answering it, I mean, just knowing him like I do, I think his problem isn't so much that he wouldn't like it if they came up with something, it's that they haven't. He says just a repeating cycle of disappointment. And that's where I think he look, you can't nobody can deny. I mean, look, we do a Star Wars show. We're hardcore fans. We'll probably now we're not apologists, right? So we're not going to sit there and make excuses for something that's bad. I mean, if something's bad, we call it
Hmm.
out. But I
Sure.
think the difference between us and a lot of the casual fans and a lot of even some of the hardcores that basically bailed on is that we're at least willing to go, hey, we're a fan of this franchise, we're a fan of this world. We want to play in this sandbox a little bit. And it's fun and nice, even if it's kind of a crappy project, to see this world either on television or in a movie. And so we're always willing to, I think, to give it a chance, right? We're no matter how much they come out with, and with the exception of a few things, there's usually something that we can find, that we like. Um, Dom's answer basically is it's a cash grab now. And then, of course, Travis joins us and says, how's it going, guys? How's it going, Travis? And, that's something that you and I have talked about, though, is the fact that
Yeah.
Disney keeps trying to replicate the success of Star Wars, and they're more concerned with that than replicating the actual storyline
Essences.
and rules and the things that actually make it what it is.
The
And
essence of Star Wars.
yes, and then Dom goes on to say they try to use the Star Wars name to make money and then let all their fans down with the slop they put out. He's not entirely wrong.
No, I mean I don't disagree with. I was just trying to figure out because it just seems like no matter what, he's always going to be like kill it, and I'm just like
well,
I
I
just wanted to
think
know why.
well, I think
But I
in
get his
the
point though.
no, and in the earlier days, I think, it was about trolling us and seeing if we can turn it into something, you know, discussion, which of course we were always able to do. But now I think a lot of it is what he's, because he and I have had discussions like off the air about this stuff. And it's basically that, it's just, can you, it's almost like you have the original trilogy, and even the prequels had some good stuff in it. And it's almost like, okay, if you had just left the legacy, it would be looked at differently than what it is now. But because you approach this with the wrong attitude, it's not, you're basically tarnishing it. He basically says they think that they can make a mediocre film and make millions because it has a Star Wars name. Of course, he says I will always hate on Star Wars. But I think that if they did come up with something legitimately good, it would be okay. It's just, a lot of it is almost like how David is, right? Now David of course turned around on Andor, and now he's I think basically like in agreement with us on it. It just took the second season for him to watch and then understand in totality. And again, I mean, I think that that's really what it comes down to is when you have these younger fans in particular, they're looking for something a little bit different. And what's funny is even the younger fans will always point to the original trilogy and say, yes, this is gold, which proves that Lucas's original trilogy is just timeless. You know, it's basically universally loved, right? It's the newer ones. If they would go back to that timelessness, they would be okay. Universal says, I agree, quality over quantity, but they love making money until they don't. Milk the cash cow until you can't. Dom says, even if Prime Luke is back, I would still be apprehensive because how terrible Disney is. And then Travis joins in saying, Finn was a fantastic character, relatable in many ways. No other Star Wars character had been. He was the kid who picked up that toy lightsaber, pooping their pants, pretending to use the Force. And then saying, for me, Finn is that underdog who appeals to the ultimate fantasy of Star Wars, being a Jedi, while also accepting the Force isn't real. I think there's so many more places to take him. Well, you missed, I think, a lot of the beginning of it. One of the things that we were saying is that, yes, they they did something that no other Star Wars project did. And I have to keep reiterating, not just because people are jumping on this live stream, but because I think that this is worth pointing out. You had a stormtrooper who defected, and then who we learned a little bit about. You never seen that. And then you find out he might be force sensitive too. I mean, there's like all kinds of crazy new things that they could have explored and didn't. But I do like your idea of setting a movie between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker to flesh Finn out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that would be only. I think that would be a good way. I won't say the only way, but I think that's a good way to round him out and give him some more uh, gravitas. So that way, at least he seems at least more equal with the rest of everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I just think that, you have what I think is a character that, again, you could really expand. I mean, they did have a comic series, they had, some other stuff. But when you're looking at the Finn character, you can really do a lot to expand his storyline. And he's one of those guys that you could actually set in different eras. And by that, I mean, you could tell stories about what he does after episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, right? Maybe, like I said, maybe he joins Rey's Jedi Academy. Or maybe like you were saying, he becomes like general or starts getting into more of a political or leadership position. Um, or maybe you set between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, and you tell a little bit about, what he was going through there, and some of his growth, and you can almost retcon the story in such a way that the fact that we see so little of him in The Rise of Skywalker, and that we get that little tease about him being a Jedi, okay, Rey doesn't know. The problem is neither do we. But if you actually have a movie that really goes into Finn exploring that force sensitivity and everything, you could end up with a thing to where the audience is all up on it. Ray just doesn't know. Like, he hasn't told her, right? He didn't have a chance to tell her. And so, in other words, it takes out that frustration of the lack of a payoff.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
All right, so we
I
got a
agree.
few more texts here. Cats. Travis says, in one of the visual guides, it's revealed Snoke's ship was pretty much abandoned above Crate. My pitch would be to have Finn go back onto the wreckage of it, searching for information. Dom basically says Finn was a terrible character. The whole trilogy would have probably played out the same without him, especially in the later movies. Doesn't necessarily mean he was a terrible character. It just means they underused him, like we've been saying. Travis says Finn realizes he's not alone on the ship, revealing savages taking it over, like Snowpiercer or Thunderdome. He's forced to fight aliens and having to fight his way out. That would be cool. Yeah, I mean, I could hang with that too. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of different directions that you could take all of this in. It just depends really on what you want to do. What makes the most sense. And then finally, Travis says, strangely, the recent Rise of Skywalker comic book from this year literally has Finn use the Force several times, which is a hilarious retcon. you know, kind of what you get with Star Wars, right? I mean, a lot of things that probably in retrospect don't make a whole lot of sense, but I don't know. Either way, I think that the future for Finn is a bright one, and that if Boyega does return to the role, I think that there's a lot that they could do. There's a lot that they should do, and maybe they can right the wrong of the underutilization and the fact that they just wrote. The character isn't bad. There's bad writing.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit is for him. I just think that you just got to, of course, according to his demand, so to speak, has to have the right story, right actors and cast with him, which I think that's smart anyway. But um, if they're going to do it, I mean, like I said, I think we should move away from the Skywalker saga. But if they're going to do it, please don't waste our time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can also say the thing that you basically say and we basically say about every one of these. Just give us a good story, good writing, good characters, good direction. That's all we need. We'll be happy. Um, Man, we're a week from tomorrow. Maul comes out. Darth Maul Shadow Lord series. So next week, there's basically another article we ran into. I think it was comic book doc. Not sure. Somebody came up with a top. Remember if it was top 10, top whatever, top dark side users or something. And we thought it might be interested to do that. So we'll do that. That'll lead up to, of course, the mall thing, and we'll start to review that. Of course, the interesting thing is going to be, because our show is on Sunday usually, the episodes will come out on Monday, and then we'll review them the following Sunday. So the good thing about that is you'll have plenty of time to watch it. So if anybody is spoiler sensitive, you'll have no real excuse. Remember, they're going to release 2 episodes at a time. So we'll be
Well, it's
reviewing both
gonna be
episodes.
interesting because it's Sunday's Easter Sunday.
Yes, that's
So,
true. Well, just let me know if you wrap everything up in time to do the show. If not, we can just hold off on that. Just do the mall thing. Let me just wrap up these few last texts that we're getting. Uh, Universal says released in 2025. he's referring to. Not sure. He said it was the one that sold well. Right. Travis says, kind of an obscure pull, but Reggie from Bad Boys 2 and 3 was kind of a joke character. Then 4 decides to make him like really cool, and it worked, but I don't think it's too late. Look, again, I cannot stress this enough. It's just like the Leo Getz character from Lethal Weapon. Same thing, right? He was kind of a joke character in Lethal Weapon 2. And he becomes part of the team.
Yeah.
I mean, but the difference is I don't think that Finn necessarily fits that description of either one.
Yeah, he
either
wasn't
Reggie or
intended to be
Leo.
a
Yeah,
joke
he wasn't
character.
exactly. That's the thing. Reggie and Leo were intended to be joke characters where
Yeah, wasn't intended. He just ended up becoming a joke because of what they did with his character.
right. Now you go, so who's a fictional character who started out lame for you but got serious with time? We'll answer that in a second. Universal says, so Finn returning with the Force makes 100% sense. Oh, I think he's talking about The Rise of Skywalker. If it makes money, that's what they will do, and the comic sold well and received well, so these talks could be, hint, hint, fruitful. And then you're saying 2025, yeah, it was likely The Rise of Skywalker. A character that started out lame but ended up being really cool. I know there's an example too, because I thought of stuff. I mean, like I said, I could put definitely. I don't know. I never actually thought the Leo Getz character was lame. I thought he was hilarious in Lethal Weapon 2. Actually, I don't know. You know what? I'll have to think about that. Can you think of anybody off the top of your head?
In Star Wars and just in cinema.
Just in general. He's just talking about general. Who's a fictional character started out lame for you but got serious with time? Well, I'll give you one in Star Wars. Ahsoka. Yeah.
Yeah, I was the first thing that popped in my mind.
I hated Ahsoka with Sky Guy and R2E and just the, like the just stupid, dippy little, teenage, like, annoying Jedi sidekick or something. Absolutely couldn't stand her character at first, and she's one of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. How's that for a turnaround? So there you go. That's an example. It's not only a fictional character, but Star Wars.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Of course, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And of course, hit the notification bell because you never know. I mean, we were on tonight, but, there have been times where, like 20 minutes before we're supposed to go live, something happens and, we can't do it. So hit the notification bell so you always know when we're on. And of course, hopefully we'll be on next Sunday. If we are on next Sunday, it'll be pretty much the whole, like I said, this top 10 or whatever dark side users. Travis basically says, I'll say Nebula absolutely sucked in Guardians of the Galaxy. When she showed up in the second one, I was dreading it. So one-dimensional by the end of it, and with each film she got better. Now I'd argue Nebula is probably the best female character in the MCU. And yeah, I mean, I could, I can go along with that. He also said it was a fun stream, so hopefully we'll see you guys either next Sunday, or if not, then look for the first, 2 Sundays from now. 2 weeks from now, it'll be our Darth Maul review, Darth Maul Shadowlord. We're gonna review each week. They're gonna release 2 episodes. We're gonna release them. I wish we were gonna release them. That means we're making the money off. We're gonna review them, and then hopefully you guys join us for that, so you can give us your thoughts on it as well. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you
always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.